What happens when a sealed envelope holds the power to rewrite 3 decades of lies, and the silence that follows speaks louder than any confession ever could? Dr. Phil held the white envelope in his hand, and for the first time in 20 years of television, he stopped. Not for a commercial break. Not for dramatic effect. He stopped because what was about to happen would change lives forever. "Stop the tape," Dr. Phil said quietly, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "Everyone stay exactly where you are." The cameras kept rolling, but the audience froze. The woman on stage, Linda, age 52, gripped the armrest of her chair. The man sitting across from her, Michael, age 48, stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "How did we get here?" "Let me take you back to where it all began." 48 hours earlier, Linda had walked into the Dr. Phil studio for what she thought would be a standard paternity dispute episode. She'd been told that Michael, the man who raised her son for 30 years, had requested DNA testing. Simple enough. Happens all the time on television. But there was something Linda hadn't told producers during pre-interviews. Something she'd buried for 3 decades. Something that would transform this from a routine paternity case into one of the most devastating revelations in talk show history. Linda had been married to Richard, Michael's brother, when she got pregnant in 1994. Richard died in a car accident when their son, Jason, was only 6 months old. Michael stepped in. Raised the boy as his own. Never questioned it. Never asked for proof. He became dad. But 2 months ago, Jason, now 30 years old, had submitted his DNA to one of those ancestry websites. The results came back with a match that made no sense. A half-sibling he'd never heard of. A connection that traced back to someone who wasn't Richard. Someone Linda knew very well. Jason confronted her. Linda broke down. And Michael's entire world shattered when his nephew, the boy he'd raised, the son he'd loved unconditionally, learned that his real father wasn't Richard. It was Michael. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The show started normally enough. Dr. Phil introduced Linda and Michael, outlined the situation as he understood it, a paternity question, a family secret, a need for closure. Standard television fare. "Linda, Dr. Phil began. "You've raised Jason with Michael's help for 30 years. Why are we here today?" Linda's voice shook. Because Jason found out something. And Michael deserves to know the truth." Michael leaned forward. "I just want to understand. Jason's been like a son to me. If Richard wasn't his father, I need to know who was." Dr. Phil nodded, preparing to transition to the DNA results segment. That's when a producer walked onto the set. Something that never happens during taping. She handed Dr. Phil a note. He read it. His expression changed instantly. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. "Linda," Dr. Phil said carefully, "before we open these results, I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer honestly, because what I'm holding here," he lifted the envelope, "is going to answer a question you haven't been asked yet." Linda's face went white. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the DNA test we ran didn't just test Jason's paternity. It tested familial matches. And there's something in here that I don't think you've told anyone." The audience began to murmur. Michael looked confused. Linda started crying. "Dr. Phil, please." "Linda." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Is there a reason why Michael's DNA would show a paternal match to Jason?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Michael's face went through a sequence of emotions. Confusion, realization, denial, shock, in the span of 3 seconds. "Wait. What? That can't be." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. "Stop the tape," he said again, louder this time. "Cameras keep rolling, but nobody moves. Michael, Linda, I need you both to stay in your seats. Audience, please stay seated." This wasn't protocol. This wasn't scripted. Dr. Phil turned to his production team, standing just off camera. Get the full report. Get Jason on the phone. And get a family therapist in here now. He turned back to Linda and Michael. What happens next is going to be one of the hardest conversations you'll ever have. But we're going to do it right. Linda was sobbing openly now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Michael's hands were shaking. You're telling me Jason is my son? My actual son? Dr. Phil sat down between them, the envelope still in his hand. Linda, I need you to tell Michael what happened. Not for the cameras. Not for the audience. For him. He deserves that. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Linda took a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. It was one night. A month before Richard died. We were all at your cabin, Michael. Richard had gone to bed early. You and I stayed up talking. We'd been drinking. I was upset about. I don't even remember what. And you were so kind. You always were. Michael closed his eyes. It just happened. Linda continued, her voice breaking. And I hated myself for it. When I found out I was pregnant, I convinced myself it was Richard's baby. I had to. If I admitted what we'd done, it would have destroyed everything. So you let me raise my own son, Michael said quietly, thinking he was my nephew. I thought it was better that way. Better? Michael's voice cracked. Better than what, Linda? Better than me knowing I had a child? Better than Jason knowing his real father was right there his entire life? Dr. Phil placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Michael, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But right now, we need to focus on Jason. He's the one who just found out his entire identity has changed. The production team had Jason on speakerphone. Dr. Phil held up the phone so both Linda and Michael could hear. Jason, it's Dr. Phil. Your mom and Michael are here with me. We have the DNA results. Are you ready? Yeah. Jason's voice came through, tight with emotion. I'm ready. Dr. Phil opened the envelope. He read the results silently, then looked at both Linda and Michael. Michael, according to this test, you are Jason's biological father with 99.9% certainty. The silence that followed was absolute. Jason's voice came through the phone, shaking. Uncle Mike? Michael's face crumpled. I'm here, buddy. I'm here. You're my dad? Yeah, Michael whispered. I guess I am. The studio audience began to cry. Several people stood up. A woman in the front row had her hand over her mouth. Dr. Phil turned to the camera, speaking directly to viewers at home. What you're witnessing right now is something I can't script and wouldn't want to. This is what happens when truth, no matter how painful, finally comes to light after 30 years. He turned back to Michael and Jason's phone. Jason, are you okay? I don't know, Jason admitted. I mean, Uncle Mike, Dad, you were always there for me. You taught me to drive. You helped me with homework. You came to every baseball game. Does this change anything? Michael wiped his eyes, looking at the phone as if he could see his son through it. It changes everything and nothing. I loved you as my nephew. I love you as my son. That part never changes. Dr. Phil looked at Linda. Linda, what do you need to say to Jason? Linda spoke directly to the phone, tears streaming down her face. Baby, I know I robbed you of 30 years of knowing the truth. I robbed Michael of 30 years of knowing he was your father. I did that because I was scared and selfish. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil addressed the audience and cameras. I'm going to do something I don't usually do. We're going to take a break from taping, but the cameras will keep recording. Linda, Michael, and Jason need time to process this privately, but with support. I've got a family therapist backstage who specializes in exactly this kind of revelation. He held up the DNA report like it was the most precious document in the world. This piece of paper doesn't just prove paternity. It represents 30 years of love that was real even when the truth wasn't known. Michael, you were Jason's father in every way that mattered long before you knew he was your biological son. Michael nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil turned back to the phone. Jason, I'm going to have my team bring you here to the studio. You need to see your dad in person. And your mom. And we're going to figure out, together, how your family moves forward from this moment. The show cut to commercial, but the cameras never stopped rolling. What followed was 40 minutes of unscripted, raw conversation between Linda, Michael, and Jason, who arrived at the studio 20 minutes later, facilitated by Dr. Phil and a trauma-specialized therapist. The transformation was visible in real time. When Jason walked onto the stage, Michael stood up. They looked at each other. This man who had been uncle and was now father, this son who had been nephew and was now something more. Jason spoke first. I don't know what to call you. Call me what you've always called me, Michael said. Call me Mike. We'll figure out the rest. They embraced. The audience erupted in applause. Linda watched, crying, knowing she'd caused this pain but grateful it was finally healing. Dr. Phil let the moment happen. No interruptions. No commentary. Just two people, father and son, holding on to each other, as 3 decades of unknowing dissolved into one moment of truth. When they finally sat down, Dr. Phil addressed the reality of what came next. Here's what happens now, he said, looking at all 3 of them. Linda, you're going to work with a therapist to understand why you kept this secret and how to rebuild trust with your son and with Michael. Michael, you're going to process the grief of lost time and the joy of discovered fatherhood. Jason, you're going to integrate this new identity into who you already are. He pulled out 3 business cards from his jacket pocket. These are referrals to specialists I trust. Family therapists who deal specifically with paternity revelations and family reconstruction. You're going to need support beyond what we can do here today. Dr. Phil placed the DNA report on the table between them. The white paper, once a symbol of secrets, now became something else, evidence of truth, painful as it was. This document, Dr. Phil said, represents the moment your family stopped living a lie and started living in reality. It won't be easy, but it will be honest. And honest is the only way forward. 3 months later, Dr. Phil brought them back for a follow-up episode. Michael and Jason had legally changed Jason's last name to include Michael's surname. Linda had completed intensive therapy and was working to repair her relationship with her son. The 3 of them, mother, father, and son, had begun family counseling together. It's not perfect, Jason told Dr. Phil during the follow-up. But it's real. And real is better than the lie we were living. Michael added, I lost 30 years of knowing Jason was my son. But I didn't lose 30 years of being his father. I was always his father. Now we both just know it. Dr. Phil looked at the audience, then at the camera. This is why truth matters. Not because it's comfortable. Not because it's easy. But because living authentically, even when it's painful, is the only way to build real relationships. He held up a photo from that original taping day, the moment Michael and Jason embraced after learning the truth. This image represents something I've learned in 20 years of doing this show. People are resilient. Families are resilient. And when you face the truth head-on, with support and love and commitment to healing, you can survive anything. The legacy of that episode extended far beyond one family. Dr. Phil's team reported receiving over 15,000 messages from viewers in similar situations, people who'd kept paternity secrets, people who suspected hidden parentage, families torn apart by decades of lies. The show created a resource page with information about DNA testing protocols, family therapy referrals, and support groups for paternity revelation situations. What happened with Linda, Michael, and Jason isn't unique, Dr. Phil told his audience. But how they chose to handle it. With courage, honesty, and a commitment to healing. That's what makes their story remarkable. The white envelope, that simple piece of paper that changed everything, became something more than just a DNA report. It became a symbol of the power of truth, the necessity of honesty, the possibility of redemption. And most importantly, it became proof that love, real, genuine, unconditional love, survives even the most devastating revelations. Because Michael loved Jason before he knew the truth. And he loved him after. That love didn't change with the DNA results. It only deepened. At the end of the day, Dr. Phil said in his closing remarks, family isn't just about biology. It's about showing up. It's about commitment. It's about love. Michael was Jason's father long before that envelope proved it. And he'll be Jason's father long after. The silence that followed that DNA reveal spoke louder than any confession could. Because in that silence, a family was reborn. Not perfect. Not painless. But honest. And honest is where healing begins.